Hey everyone, it's Carter King. If you're an educator, a leader, or just a parent who wants to teach kids about space, check out my newest book, Carter's Journey Through Space. It's available now on Amazon, Target, and bookstores everywhere. Come explore the universe with me.
Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create environments where people thrive. Through real conversations, practical strategies, and powerful stories, we equip leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself to build cultures rooted in purpose, performance, and authenticity. Because culture isn't something you talk about, it's something you live. This is the Contagious Culture Podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create ecosystems and environments where people thrive. I am really excited for today's conversation because our guest, she's a rock star. She's the COO at an organization that is doing absolutely amazing work. She's a keynote speaker, author, operations consultant who helps purpose-driven organizations turn their priorities into processes and their vision into execution. And what I appreciate most about her work is that she lives at the intersection of people, like we do here at the Contagious Culture Podcast, and process. And she understands that healthy organizations need strong leadership, they need clear communication, they need operational discipline, and they ultimately need people, like people who are really willing to stay curious, even when times and conversations become difficult. So today we're talking about all the things. We're talking about what happens when purpose meets process, how leaders build these cultures within their organizations that can actually survive and that actually can execute, and why curiosity may ultimately be one of the most important leadership skills that we can develop. Heather, how are you, my friend?
All right. I hope I can live up to all that hype.
Oh, yeah. You are a rock star. It's such a privilege to even be in the same virtual ecosystem of you. And I have so many questions, but I guess I would love to just get us started with, what is keeping you fired up and inspired these days? Like, you have a very versatile career background. You wear many hats. What's keeping you inspired these days?
I mean, what's really inspiring me right now is the belief in the possibility that we actually can have conversations, respectful conversations with people who disagree with us. And I started having those conversations I think it was around 2016. And I felt like I was the only one doing it. I was like, oh my gosh, we have to record these conversations and like show people that like we have so much in common and we can listen and understand why we see things differently and where those different perspectives come from. And then recently I discovered a national organization also started in 2016 called Braver Angels, is actually doing this at scale. So it's been really exciting to see, like, this isn't just like my idea of like, one person. It's actually, I mean, look, it's an idea that's been around for thousands of years. But to see it happening today at scale at a national level and to be part of that along with the work that I'm doing, I just find it so inspiring.
I have so many questions, and there's always a thought that happens before I get to the next question when a guest shares something. And you mentioned this idea of difficult conversations. So I'd love to know how you would even define what a difficult conversation is. I think, I would define it maybe as a, different opinion that you're having with someone that you may be having. Textbooks may define it as something else. I read a book called Crucial Conversations that would define a crucial conversations as one where the emotions are high, it's a high stakes environment, and when we have opposing opinions, But how would you ultimately, Heather, define what a difficult conversation is? And what are some of the characteristics or even tools that we can use to better navigate those difficult times?
I don't really think about it as difficult conversations even. So I'm going to turn the question on its head a little bit. I think we all have had an experience where we're talking to someone who we know and love and realize that they don't agree with us about something that's really important. And where I focus that is it tends to be around political issues, but you know what? It's not limited to that, of course, right? But I do look at where that comes up in conversations around some kind of, whether it's national politics, whether it's global politics. And we have so much identity wrapped up in our opinions that when someone disagrees with us, it feels like a personal attack. So those are the conversations where it really helps to take a step back and to get curious and to say, oh, I didn't know that this person thought that, or, maybe I sort of suspected, but now I know for sure. But where is that thought process coming from? And there are just so many ways to ask questions around that and to better understand. And what you often uncover is that there are often common values lying at the center of that between you and that other person.
This reminds me, I love what you mentioned in regards to a lot of our identity is wrapped into kind of how we view the world. And this reminds me of so many times where someone may express an opinion on something. We may be having a conversation and then I'm enlightened by something that they say. And they may mention that they have certain political views or religious views or whatever the case may be. And we often, as human beings, unfortunately, begin to create a bias or judge that person based upon their opinion, rather than welcoming that opinion, recognizing that they may view the world differently and they may choose different things, but that's still a human being and they still deserve relationship, kindness, love, all of those different things. So I guess my question, Heather, is how do we differentiate or not create those biases or those judgments based upon just people's general opinions about different things and topics when they are to share those things, especially within the workplace?
I think bias is actually very natural for us as humans. And I don't know if it's immediately preventable. I think that most people are often going to have an immediate reaction of, oh, that person must be like this if they believe that, right? But there is the opportunity to step back, to open ourselves up and to explore that person's humanity and who they really are. And it can be really surprising. I'm just thinking about a video that I watched. I wasn't there in person, but it was a very devout Christian man who was in a workshop with a Muslim who was from a Middle Eastern country.
Okay.
And they were very much strangers when they first met. One was progressive, one was conservative, very different religions. And in the course of a few hours, they got to know each other as human beings.
That's good.
And they actually each went to each other's place of worship to experience what that was like and to learn from each other and just open themselves up to who is this other person and how can I get to know them. And I just think if that's possible for them, then I feel like we can do this in our everyday lives.
I love that. And you mentioned a word, just experiences. And I believe the more that we are willing as people, as listeners, even on this conversation today, to experience someone else's reality, someone else's, viewpoints, I believe it gives us an insight and an eye, as well as it allows our heart to open up to seeing things a little bit differently. Heather, you've worked across many sides of the business: operations, leadership development, business development, consulting, and now even entrepreneurship. What would you say in your years of experiences has shaped the leader that you are? Hey, it's Kyle. Sorry to interrupt your programming, but I got a quick culture check for you. How's your team's energy right now? I mean, literally, right now. Are people feeling inspired? Or are they just showing up? See, here's the truth. Culture doesn't change because we talk about it. It changes because we live it actively every single day. And that's what I help organizations do. Build contagious cultures that people actually want to be a part of. Through keynote talks, interactive trainings, and hands-on consulting, I help leaders transform the way their teams connect, perform, and grow. So if your culture needs a little bit of spark, let's light it up together. Visit theculturelab.org, again, theculturelab.org, or connect with me directly on LinkedIn at Kyle S. King to learn more about how we can work together. Because remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching. Now let's get back to the program.
That's such a big question. I mean, there are different facets of being a leader.
Yeah.
And one of them, I think, is values-based. I spent years being mentored by a leader when I was a young adult. When I was in my early 20s, I met Libby Frank. She was a lifelong peace and justice activist. We met through the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And she took me under her wing, to use a cliche. But part of it was having your heart in the right place and knowing what you stood for. And part of it was having the courage to speak out, even when what you had to say might be uncomfortable or make other people uncomfortable. And part of it was being able to have the difficult conversations that we talked about, which when I was writing Libby's story, I got to hear about a lot of the conversations that she had and how she brought together a global group of women, including women from Israel and from Palestine, in the same room to talk about what should peace in the Middle East look like. That was probably the most extreme example, but there were so many examples of that. So that was a great inspiration and source of development for me. And then there's the operational side. When I first started as COO of Brody Pro, I reached out to women leaders that I knew, and I said, what do I need to know to do this role? Because I've never been in a role like this before. And one person said, oh, you should read Traction by Gino Wickman. And so I discovered the entrepreneurial operating system.
Such a great
right?
book.
It's so good. And it's so actionable. And it's really about like taking ideas and vision and like creating a plan around it and creating accountability around it. And, making sure you have all of your people in place. And those are just two examples. I feel like I could go on and on because it's such a big question, but I feel like those two are good representatives.
I love that. And that leads me to my next question. I think a lot of how we have developed as leaders and the experiences that we've learned or gained either professionally or personally have allowed us to have a lens of when we step into organizations, when we lead organizations, and our perspectives and our viewpoints. And when you walk into an organization, Heather, how can you tell the difference between this is a maybe personnel or a people problem versus this is a processes issue?
I think it's hard to tell when it's a personnel or people problem until you've assessed the process. Because when process isn't going well, it's going to look like a people problem. So I think you have to assess process first every time.
Let's unpack that for a second. Assessing process. What am I looking at? I'm a leader coming in the door day 1 or day 55. And I know that after I've assessed various things, I recognize that is a process issue. What have I looked for to even determine that's a process issue? And then once I determine that, what are my next steps so that I can be able to create some solutions?
You're looking for whether you have clearly defined roles, whether you have clearly defined outcomes for those roles, whether the handoffs are clear, whether and when I say handoffs, I mean between the different roles. And you're looking for how the work gets done. Do people know how to do the work? And if so, how do they know how to do the work? How are they learning how to do the work? Are there opportunities for improvement? Are people doing things manually with a lot of room for human error that could actually be done in an automated way, save people a lot of time, cut out a lot of those errors, prevent a lot of the downstream issues? And I think culture may also be a part of process in terms of, are there expectations around culture in terms of how do we communicate with each other? How do we set expectations? How do we provide feedback? Are we all on the same page with what those expectations are? And are we on the same page about where we're going? So, I mean, there are books written about this. That's like the high level. But as you start looking at those things, you will see what needs to be shifted. And it's not something that happens all at one time, right? It's something that you have to just keep working at. I mean, I've been in the COO role at Brody for about 6 or 7 years now. And I'm still working on our processes and our role clarity. And I think we have an excellent culture, and that really helps things. It really helps facilitate the process optimization and the working together when the culture is in a good place.
How would you define culture, Heather?
I think culture is the way we communicate with each other and the patterns, the patterns of interaction. I think, people talk a lot about values in culture, and I do think values show up in culture, but I don't think they can be dictated. So, for example, you could have a value of, we work together as a team. But the culture is actually what happens. How does that show up? Like if someone says, hey, I need help with this, that someone else steps in and says, I can do that.
Exactly. I think about it when obviously we talk about culture all the time within this podcast and even within the work that we do organizationally. And it always brings me up to a question when I'm on the phone or even on a call with leaders, where it's like, how do we define a healthy organization? And I guess my question for you is, what does a healthy organization look like behind the scenes? Like not the website, not the mission statement, but the everyday behaviors, conversations, and systems. Like what are you seeing on your side of the aisle that embodies healthy organizations and the characteristics that exist?
I'm thinking of like the metaphor of a healthy organization to a healthy body. And I think that, for most of us, I mean, by the time we hit our 40s and sometimes younger, sometimes even much younger, we're never fully healthy, right? There's always something going on. You got to go to the doctor for something, even like you catch a cold, catch the flu. Sometimes you might have chronic issues. I think it's kind of similar for an organization, that we're not looking for perfection. But one of the things we want to look for is, do people actually care about each other? Do they communicate with each other because they want to and not just because they have to?
That's good. That's a really good one. And I think about the organizations that I even exist in, and there's relationship outside of just the work. There is curiosity outside of just the work. There's, even on the nonprofit side, there's an interest in the impact outside of the determined hours or infrastructure. And, I love your perspectives. I love your philosophies, and even just how you showcase this in your everyday work. What are you trying to make possible these days? And it's always a question that I love to ask is, we oftentimes as leaders are so focused on the work and the people that we don't get a chance to really just either visualize where we're going or just kind of sit in what we're trying to accomplish. What are you trying to make possible these days, Heather?
I think about you talked about in the beginning, purpose-driven organizations.
Yeah.
And I think about purpose-driven organizations, and a lot of times they are very lean, and there's a lot of overwork, burnout, stress. As you said, you're so focused on the day-to-day that it's often hard to take a step back and focus on the big picture. And the impact of that is we can spend a lot of time and energy working on things that aren't really advancing our mission as much as we might expect it to. And so what I'd like to make possible is creating that clarity around what is the work that we can do that will have the greatest impact on our mission. And how do we stay focused on that work? And how do we stay accountable to that work so that these amazing purpose-driven organizations can all be creating a better world for us?
Heather, I really am so thankful of you sharing that one statement of what is the work that we can be doing that directly essentially ties to our mission. And I sit on a board of an organization here in Charlotte that we have grown significantly over the years, and we're entering a phase of really scaling forward. And there's so many things that the outside community is bringing to us, where a podcast and another offering and another event in another city, all of these other opportunities to grow and expand. But I'm reminded in this conversation that it has to, though, align with our mission, or it's just going to be more stuff, more processes, more distractions, and we're just going to be doing more work and not really going deeper within the mission that we are setting out to achieve. And what do you suggest for those organizations that have a lot going on, but oftentimes a lot that's going on isn't tied back to mission? What would you say to those organizations?
I'm going to answer with an example.
Yeah.
I was speaking with a director of strategy at a nonprofit organization recently, and she was working on executing a strategic plan. And so, number one, I think a lot of organizations have a strategic plan, but they don't spend a whole lot of time focused on executing it. It just kind of sits there. And And it sits there, maybe we imagine, oh, we're trying to achieve these 3 main objectives. And maybe that's what's at the head. But actually, a strategic plan is much more detailed than that. And it's much more helpful than that if you use it on a regular basis. But it can be overwhelming. And I think that's one of the reasons why it sits on the shelf, is because it's overwhelming. It's too much. And so the next thing we talked about is you can't execute this whole strategic plan right now. What are the most important things that you can do? And this is inspired by Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, in the next quarter. Like, what can you accomplish the next quarter that is going to move this strategic plan forward?
I'm asking myself that right now. What are the things that we can accomplish within the next quarter that can allow us to move our mission forward, either in the business or even on the nonprofit side? Heather, I challenge you to answer that question. Like, what are the things that we can do as listeners, as leaders, that can help you achieve the goals that you're wanting to achieve by next quarter? Like, what are the actions that we can take? How can we continue to lift or show up for your mission that you're working to achieve?
My goal for next quarter is actually to find and start working on a project that will really let me bring all of my expertise and background to play. So what I've been doing in order to achieve that goal is I've been exploring. I've been having conversations with different nonprofits that are struggling operationally to see where can I help and support that need to help them move to that next level. So if there is a nonprofit organization out there, a mission-driven organization, particularly that's trying to create a positive change in the world, that feels like they could use some support, I am welcoming conversations.
Heather, why this work? You know, I love getting on the phone with the social impact leaders and even sharing the stage with social impact leaders, because there's always a story behind why their heart goes to this type of work, or what were the experiences that led you to this type of work. Like, why this work?
I didn't understand until I was in college that there was so much injustice in the world. I didn't grow up wealthy, okay? But I had enough. And I had the Philadelphia public school education, and that was enough for me. And I thought, this is fine, everything is fine. And in college, I majored in women's studies, which I think is a bit of a misnomer. And they've actually renamed the department in many places, in many colleges. But it's where I started to learn about systems. And systems can be microsystems, they can be global systems, but there are power systems in place. And inevitably, people with more power have the ability and potential to oppress or take things from people with less power. And when I discovered that, and when I understood the extent of the injustice that was happening in this world, and really how unnecessary so much of the suffering in this world is, that lit a fire in me that is still lit. And I still would like to see a world with more justice and more peace. And I would like to see all of the people who are working on those issues to be as successful as they can.
Heather, this has been such a great conversation. I think one of the biggest things that I've taken from everything that you've shared today is that purpose alone isn't enough. Like, you can have this great vision and incredible mission statement, and even incredible people, and eventually that purpose, that story, that passion, there has to be processes and operations in place to be able to move it forward. It has to show up, though, like you were mentioning earlier, culturally, and how we communicate and how we make decisions and how we create spaces to hold people accountable or increase standards for excellence within our organizations. And I think that creates a culture in regards to like how we lead as individuals. What's next for that leader that's listening, and what's that first step that you would recommend them make now?
Well, sorry, I was just listening to your little child back there.
Definitely the commercial people. I actually recommend reading Traction. I think it is really helpful for clarifying your thoughts about how to operationalize your vision. And I don't mean to be like a plug for the book, because I have no stake in the book at all. But as a first step, I mean, that was my first step when I moved into the COO role, and it was a great one for me. I would definitely recommend that to everybody, and I'm going to have that link in the show notes. For all of our listeners out there, I want you to just do one thing. I want you to remember that culture it's not what you say, people. Culture is what people consistently experience when they encounter your leadership. Culture is one of those things that is required. It's wisdom is required to be able to build a culture that's lasting. Tapping into other people's experiences is required to be able to build a culture that's lasting. And being able to connect with Heather online will be able to be one step closer to creating an organization internally that can help you grow, not just for tomorrow, not just in revenue, but to build a culture that is lasting. So until next time, my friends, keep building something that's worth catching. This is another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King. And always remember, the energy you bring is the culture you create. So go make yours worth catching. We'll see you guys next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Contagious Culture Podcast. If this episode challenged or inspired you, hey, take a second to share it with someone who's building culture in their world. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself join the movement. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or YouTube at Kyle S. King for more tips, tools, and methodologies to be able to help you create this ecosystem of absolute excellence. Until next time, lead boldly, live intentionally, and remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching.